What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shape their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community, I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is Tracey Brady-Yurko, Chief Legal Officer and Corporate Secretary of Bridgewater Associates, a premier asset management firm. Prior to joining Bridgewater, Tracey practiced with two powerhouse international law firms representing banks, insurers, private equity funds, and mezzanine funds in a wide range of banking and securities transactions. Today, we're going to dive into the lessons she learned playing lacrosse at Johns Hopkins and how she continues to serve student athletes as a member of the Johns Hopkins Lacrosse Advisory Board. Tracey has a special place in my heart because of the work she does as the board chair for Make-A-Wish Connecticut. As always, visit corporatecompetitorpodcast.com/133 to download the free bonus resource we put together for you with fill-in-the-blank notes and reflection questions for today's episode.
Okay, you're not going to be the biggest, strongest, but here's your secret weapon. When you have someone else who kind of sees something in you that you don't see or believes in you, that can just be such a difference maker. An offensive coach, he saw something in me that maybe I didn't see in myself. We spoke about my jersey and me being small in size, and both in my collegiate career and in my professional career, I have felt that sometimes people tend to underestimate me, and that could be kind of your secret weapon.
Tracey, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You know, growing up in Morristown, New Jersey, you found yourself into the sport of lacrosse. I had a chance to read the story of your jersey number. I always thought, why would she pick 3?
Sure. So when I was in high school back in Morristown, New Jersey, probably like many high school programs, the jerseys for the games, the numbers were by size. So the smallest number jerseys were the smallest sizes. So I am all of 5'2", and I'm probably rounding up a little bit there. So I was definitely picking a small number. I went with 3, and it stuck with me ever since.
Small but mighty, because you went on to have a successful enough career that you would play collegiately at Johns Hopkins for Coach Janine Tucker. I know you're still very involved in the program, you being on the advisory board. Talk to me a little bit about what did lacrosse teach you, especially as you made that transition from high school to college?
I wasn't the biggest, strongest athlete on the field by a long stretch. The difference maker for me was willing to put in the time, to put in the hard work. I was on the field before practice. I stayed on the field after practice, extra reps. I came into the season conditioned, and I felt like being a college athlete made this transition from living at home to being kind of on your own and independent. And you have to learn to balance things, your schedule, your schoolwork, and with your sport. It really teaches people how to get a lot done when you don't have a lot of time. Janine Tucker, her first year coaching at Johns Hopkins was my freshman year. She had been at Loyola down the street prior to that. We were sort of starting in that together. She was my coach straight through, and she sometimes refers her old players as her vintage players, which I asked her not to, not to do. When Janine was starting out in her coaching career at Johns Hopkins, she had a young family and she had young children when I was there in college. We were traveling for games. We were all over the place. They were there with us. They traveled. She never missed a beat. She was on top of it all. How hard that must have been was pretty invisible to me, in my early 20s as a college player. Now, as a working mom, she's such an inspiration in how she was able to navigate that and just be so incredibly successful. I'm still learning things from her and from that experience.
Wow.
As a young woman, sports really taught me things like how to fight through something, how to confront something when you aren't good at it, how to work at something to get harder. I mean, it really teaches you sort of determination and grit and competition and teamwork. I was able to work really hard to achieve those things. And then think about how the corporate world works. Sometimes people are afraid or don't want to point out the things that they are good at. When you play sports, it comes so naturally. Your coach, even your teammates say, like, hey, these are the things we can really use Tracey for on the field. This is the position she should be in. This is when she should be in the game. This is the role that she should be playing on the field. People are so much more open to it. I mean, if you think about taking a golf lesson or a ski lesson, you're paying that person to tell you what you're doing wrong. And if they didn't tell you that, you wouldn't feel like you got your money's worth. Corporate America, we lose some of that at the time, and looking at what are strengths and what are weaknesses of people and being really honest about what those weaknesses are so that you're not putting someone in a position where they're not going to succeed or they're not going to be the best contributor that they can be. It's ingrained in our culture. At Bridgewater, where I work now, that's understanding strengths and weaknesses, embracing the weaknesses, working on those, improving them where you can and as much as you can, and being in a role that plays to your strengths.
That is so powerful because the beauty of sports is, as you said, just as it is in the corporate environment, it becomes evident to all involved in sports. Hey, here obviously is where I belong and where I can most contribute. If I want to contribute differently, I need to go do something differently. Talking about great leaders having the ability to change their leadership style based upon the situation. Can you remember a moment when you learned this lesson for yourself?
During the pandemic, the people on my team needed something different from their leaders than they needed before. People needed to see vulnerability in their leaders. They needed to see that this was hard for everyone. It was hard in so many ways. Their normal lives were disrupted. We didn't know what was going on. People were getting sick. We were scared. And it gave everybody permission to admit that it was hard if the people who were leading them were admitting that they too were struggling, that they too were scared, that they too were being impacted by this, and that life wasn't just going on as normal. That was a real eye-opening moment for me internally to show more of that vulnerability, to say, like, we have lives here and it's all going on, under our roofs.
Right.
Leaders today need to evolve in that way. And I think the pandemic pushed this, wanting to find sort of meaning in what you're doing is something that the next generations look for from their leaders and also from their careers. That human connection, I hope we don't lose, but I don't think we're going to lose on a going forward basis. And it's certainly something I consciously think about as a leader. And we all kind of tend to our natural leadership style. Mine has tended to be lead by example type of person, like not wanting to ask people to do something that I wasn't willing to do, not asking them to work harder than I was willing to work. But the pandemic really had me revisit making sure that I was showing different sides of that leadership style because people needed something different. They didn't just need to keep working harder. As now a working parent, Coach Tucker back then, and the inspiration I drew from seeing her be able to balance in a great way. One of the things I try to do is being really open with people about how hard that could be, creating an environment where people have that flexibility to succeed, as much as possible at both. The work of parenting is no longer becomes sort of this invisible thing that you're not showing at work. Being a parent is such an important part of what many people, choose to do, that it becomes sort of integral. Being able to work remotely helps balance both things.
We mentioned Coach Tucker's name a couple times. I always love to ask people, especially if you were able to play anything collegiately, you had to have some great influence on your sports journey, someone who helped you kind of make your way along.
Sure. I mean, when you have someone else who kind of sees something in you that you don't see or believes in you, that can just be such a difference maker. And I've had that in my professional career where I've had mentors or people where they think you can achieve something, and knowing that someone you really respect and knows what they're talking about helps you believe in yourself. Obviously, we've talked about Coach Tucker. We also had an offensive coach by the name of Ricky Freed. He's the head women's coach at Georgetown now. There's a fair amount of men coaching in collegiate women's lacrosse now, but at the time, he was a real outlier. We were the first women's team that he coached. I remember very early on in my career as a freshman, just not having a good game and just getting really frustrated, coming off the field, kind of like that, the League of Our Own.
There's no crying in baseball?
Yeah, there was like a League of Our Own moment where I kind of started crying and he was like, I don't know what to do. He had never coached women before. And so I think we both kind of helped each other, but he saw potential in me. He saw something in me that maybe I didn't see in myself. And he helped me to recognize. We spoke about my jersey and me being small in size. And I always believed in this thing. Some people call it knowing your superpower. I kind of thought about it as your secret weapon. For me, both in my collegiate career and in my professional career, I have felt that sometimes people tend to underestimate me, maybe based on appearance and size and whatnot. And that could be kind of your secret weapon. Okay, you're not going to be the biggest, strongest, but here's your secret weapons and how to use those on the field. Coach Freed was someone who really helped me identify that.
Have you gone back and ever said thank you to him for giving you that belief in yourself?
I don't think that I have. So now I'm going to have to send him this podcast on. So he knows.
Well, good. No, that's been one of the things we've enjoyed as much as anything about doing this podcast is how often those names have come up for people and they've been able to, for the first time, really realize it was years ago, but it made a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing your secret weapon, we all have them, I believe, but most people don't really ever sit down to kind of unpack what it is that might be something I could uniquely bring to the world or bring to the workplace.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. We've talked about teams. Teams are often one of those words that gets thrown around in a corporate setting. Most people, they talk about their team, but they don't really have one. What they have is a group of individual contributors fighting for attention. A team is something special. You've been on them. You've participated in teams that were highly successful. If you're offering advice on how to create that environment where individuals will come together for some greater good, what are some of the ways you would suggest they start thinking about the way they grow them?
Yeah, look, I think it's the obligation of leaders to give people that feedback of what are their strengths and weaknesses. If you're trying to build a team, you want to know what everyone's strengths and weaknesses are so you can build the strongest team. Leaders should be helping people identifying those things and giving them that kind of feedback. And on the flip side, if you're someone who wants to get better at things and wants to understand what you're good at and what you're not good at, you should ask that of people. Ask them to give you that feedback because sometimes people are reticent to do it. They don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. And I think if you really show that you're open to it, you really can get things from people that you didn't see in yourself. But first of all, I think a team, it needs to have a shared mission. You talked about a lot of individual contributors. You need everyone aligned to a goal together, working toward that goal. That means every person on that team wants every person to do their best and achieve the most that they can because you're all working towards that goal together. That, I think, is the real difference maker. Once you have that shared mission, that shared thing that you're working together as a team, that's when I go to knowing each other's strengths and weaknesses so that you're putting each person on the team in the best position, in the best spot to contribute as much as they can to the whole. And then for that to really work, there needs to be trust. Everyone needs to trust each other. If not, they're not going to trust when you're pointing out strengths and weaknesses that you're doing it for their best good.
So true. One of my favorite books is a book titled Radical Candor. Candorous conversations in which they know you're actually offering it for their good,
Mhm.
not because I now have an open opportunity. No, it's, are you offering it for their good?
Yeah, I'm lucky because I work at a place where that is very much part of our culture. We always say at Bridgewater, nothing should surprise you in your review. If you're having the right kind of dialogue with the people that you work with, you're doing this all the time with one another. The reviews process isn't a surprise to anyone. And one of the most important things for a leader to do in that situation is to create an environment where giving that kind of feedback is really natural and part of it. When I have feedback sessions with my team, I will start with my own assessment of myself. Here are the ways that I think I have failed. Here are the things that I think I didn't do well. Do you guys agree? Like, really trying to open that door to that feedback.
Mm.
When you get that feedback, whether you agree with it or not, and you don't always agree with it, thank people for it. It's not easy for people to deliver hard feedback. They're trying to help you. So thank them for spending the time and doing it. And sometimes I get feedback and my initial reaction is kind of, oh, that can't be, I don't agree with it. Take a step back and you think about it and you think, actually, there's something I can pull from that. There's something there that's right that I can learn from. It is scheduled, it's part of our reviews process, but if you're doing it right, you're doing it all the time. Like anything, if you're flexing the muscle all the time, you're better at it, it gets easier, and it just becomes a very natural part of your relationship with your coworkers. And it's really important when you're given feedback to not react too quickly to it, because you might close that door and that person might never give you something really helpful in the future.
That's got to be a pretty powerful first discussion, owning your own assessment of yourself and then asking them if they agree. Was there ever crickets in those conversations? How do you get them across that line of comfort to be able to throw that back at you?
It's not always easy, and I've probably not always been perfect at it. The purpose behind it, the intention behind it is to make you better. Believe that. Even if you don't agree with the feedback or you do agree with it, the intention behind it is to make you better. Well, that's the fuel.
Yeah.
At Bridgewater, I've been there for over 10 years now. I learn something every day. That's what keeps me in it. And I think this feedback culture is really a part of that because there's a constant improvement and constant evolution.
Flexing the muscle of feedback.
It's a great word.
You said something that really stood out to me. Leadership in tough times requires grace under fire.
Mhm.
Boy,
I always want people bringing problems to me. If I don't know about a problem, I can't address it. I can't help de-risk it. And when people see that you are calm, they will bring those things to you. If they think that you're going to have this emotional or angry or whatever it is kind of reaction, they won't bring the problems to you. And so I always think it's sort of important in a risk type of role like mine that you are the calm one. All kinds of leaders, you don't want people not coming to you because you seem stressed out. You seem, so I do think it requires you to have an equanimity as a leader so that you can help other people be calm. Because when you have a crisis, you need to think clearly and not in a panicked, emotional type of way, and also to lead the team and to kind of carry out your responsibilities even with your peers. In times of crisis, your head is clear, you are calm, and you're going to attack whatever that problem is.
so chief legal officer, it's important that you want people to bring problems to you. You have to be able to react calmly. What exactly is that role in a way that maybe we could all kind of relate it to something in our own organizations?
Yeah, so I oversee what we call our legal and regulatory department. So we are a registered investment advisor regulated by the SEC and many other organizations. We have about little under, I think, 1,500 employees. We trade in markets all over the world for some of the most sophisticated entities in the world, really. Any kind of number of things, whether it's how we react for the pandemic, both the impacts on the market, but also the impacts on our people, any kind of dispute or litigation that's going on within the company. We could be working on a large corporate transaction. Our remit is really quite broad, But a lot of times, the things that we work on are tricky things that you just have to have a very clear head and strategy to kind of work through. Sometimes it's the moments when score is tight, time is ticking down. Who do you want to give the ball to? Give it to the person that has grace under fire.
Wow. That ability to be the calm one, even when things are tough, that is a gift. I know you don't only lead in business. I've noticed you taking a sip from your Make a Wish cup there from the national meeting. You also lead in the community Make a Wish Connecticut's board chair. I've done many Make a Wish discussions because I so value and love the organization. Is there a memorable, impactful moment that you'll hold on to as a result of your leadership in that particular chapter?
Yeah, I mean, we start all of our board meetings with a wish moment. We have a family come in and talk about their wish. And sometimes they've just had the wish, sometimes they're leading up to the wish, but we get to meet the whole family. And there's been so many moments of different families talking about how the wish changed them and what the wish meant for them. I didn't really understand until I got more involved with the organization. The wish is not just about the wish child, it impacts the whole family. When you have a child with a critical illness in your family, the impact that that has on the siblings, on the parents becomes broader than just that child. There's a particular wish that we had very bright young man that was hospitalized for a long time, off and on, here in Connecticut. And he was having trouble sleeping in the hospital because he had machines monitoring him and light, and it was really difficult. So he designed a screen that the nurses and the doctors can still see through it and see what they need to see, but it helps to block the light so that the patient is more comfortable. And his wish, the patent
Oh, wow.
for his screen.
I don't think I've ever heard of that one.
Yeah, it was so like my sort of nerdy lawyer self. It was a pretty cool wish.
Yeah.
A law firm that we work very closely with, Gibson Dunn, was willing to do the work pro bono with him. He has a patent pending and he was able to put it on his college application. So fingers crossed his patent is coming soon.
That's so awesome. The best part about it is to hear how many incredible wishes and so many other things, but it is those unique ones.
Mhm.
So one of my favorite parts about doing Zoom calls is that I get to look at people's bookshelves. I see over your shoulder there a book with Bill Campbell, the Trillion Dollar Coach,
Mhm.
who had so much impact on so many people as a mentor. His name has come up several times in this podcast from different people who have had experiences with him. Who mentors or coaches you today?
I'm really lucky. I mean, my predecessor at Bridgewater, who retired several years ago, was just an incredible mentor to me. He felt very strongly that part of his job was to prepare a successor, to give the company someone he felt was ready. And going back to where we were earlier in the conversation, someone that sort of believes in you and sees something in you and thinks that you're capable of things, and how much that can boost someone. Very invested in mentoring me and giving me opportunities to kind of stretch as much as I was able to. I've also been fortunate enough to have some people outside of Bridgewater that I've drawn on as mentors as well. Louise Parent, who is the general counsel of American Express for many years, was someone that I have spoken to, had lunches with, incredible advice over the years. They come in all kinds of places, I feel like. And I have been so surprised how often people want to pay it forward. And I feel so fortunate for how willing people are to help people and to be mentors. Don't be afraid. Worst thing that happens is someone says no. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask. I have a real soft spot, for people who are motivated like that. I recent law student at Harvard who runs there. They have a law and business student group. He reached out and asked me to come talk to them. And people who network like that and are willing to just ask the question, I have a super soft spot for that. And I'm not alone. So
I love that. The root of the word predecessor is preparing a successor. It's a lost art. There are so many people who are afraid to pick and do well for a successor for fear that you might surpass something that I've achieved. I love that you have someone that actually didn't have so much ego, caught up that they cost themselves the opportunity to prepare the person who might follow them.
Oh, it's so true, Don. And we talk about building great teams. You need to give the people on your team opportunities and development and room to stretch. What makes me good at my job, or how do people in our leadership recognize? I mean, a huge part of that is saying, what a great team I have. That in and of itself is a skill. And I think there are people who are afraid to let others shine because they're afraid that they might outshine them. But really, their shining is just going to light up everyone around them, including leadership.
That's powerful. There's some great business stories out there in the press today about success or challenges. But, one of the things we always love is some high school yearbook photos that we're able to find. I noticed that, like, there you were in the chemistry club, the only young woman in the club.
I don't know if you've ever played that game, Two Lies and a Truth.
Yes.
I always use the chemistry team thing because no one believes I was on the chemistry team in high school, but I was.
Now they will.
I will tell you, I was not a starter on the chemistry team. There were competitions and I was a bench rider, but I was on the team.
So what advice do you give that I can offer my 13-year-old daughter?
Well, to say like my career is all completely intentional, I'm not sure that it was, but being in enough things where I didn't really know how to do it, I learned how to figure it out. Mm. The things I'm responsible for are very, very broad, and I'm not an expert in all of them. By almost none of them am I really truly a deep, deep expert in. But I learned how to figure stuff out. I know how to ask the right questions to get the people who are the experts involved. You got to be comfortable not being good at stuff, and that's okay. You're just going to have so many different experiences.
Yes.
And putting yourself in places where you're uncomfortable, but you have to figure out how to do something, build you. And by exposing yourself to lots of different things, some of which you might be really good at, it makes you well-rounded, if you will, as a person.
Think about that as a superpower, the ability to learn how to figure it out. In a world where things get increasingly complicated, the ability to ask the right questions and get to the experts, boy, that's powerful. I'm going to guess you've played enough in the world of sports, worked long enough in business. You've seen momentum play out in how a team or a company gets on a roll and starts to dominate. Like nothing can go wrong. I'm fascinated by the concept of momentum, one way or the other, positively or negatively.
I believe in momentum, but I think there's the why behind it. You see in history so many great teams where they don't have the best players, the most stars, the whatever, but 1 + 1 = 3. The whole is worth more than the parts. And that's where the momentum comes from, is the bringing together of people where the sum is more than the parts. Once you get on that roll, people start working together more and more and more. And I know, looking back on my 4 years at Johns Hopkins playing lacrosse, the year we had the strongest individual players, like the best players, the best talent, we had the worst record of all the years that I played there. And I think it was something about the dynamic of the team. Maybe the sum was worth more than the parts, but not in the ways that it was in years where we might not have had. So my senior year, I think we had lost maybe 3 or 4 of the top scorers on the team, but we actually had a better record that year. And I think it was the pieces of the team coming together as a whole.
Chemistry was different and better.
Mm-hmm.
Tracey Yurko, I am so grateful that our paths crossed, that we share this Make-A-Wish love that drew us together. I'm so thankful that you took time to be with us, to share and to be part of the corporate competitor team and offer some wisdom. Thank you today for all that you've given. Is there a way that people can connect with you?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to send me a message or connect with me or follow me.
We are so grateful to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Wow. Tracey Yurko was fantastic. My 3 great takeaways from today. The first was learning how to figure it out is a superpower, that it's a skill set. Ask the right questions. Don't be overwhelmed when something comes your way that's not in your traditional skill set. Ask the right questions. Find out who the experts are that you need to get to, then go do that. And then learn to be uncomfortable. Learn to stretch. When you can learn to figure it out, you have a skill set that will serve you for life. The second takeaway I had was about the obligation she argued that leaders have to give feedback on both strengths and weaknesses constantly within your organization so that nothing should ever surprise you when it comes time for a review. I thought it was powerful that she used the idea that giving feedback, seeking feedback is almost like flexing a muscle. If done repeatedly, done consistently, we grow and we grow stronger. And finally, having the calmness, the presence in her role to show grace under fire, that in times of crisis, your head needs to remain cool. Because when you are that kind of leader, when you are that kind of teammate, you are the person people will bring problems to. And if you want to be a solver of problems, you have to be one with a calm head. She was a powerful corporate competitor today, and I hope you feel like you are a better competitor tomorrow for having listened. If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yeager, who did that that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man? Great, sir. How
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. We are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code podcast at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager, Yaeger, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.